Hey everybody, XEI here. Welcome back to another XEI Reads Mass Effect Revelation by Drew Karpyshyn, and it's the second installment. So we are cracking into Act 2, and where we left off was Chapter 5. It was the end of Act 1, and it was the end of the second narrative category I call Conflict Arises, and it was creeping into the third category called Journey Begins. Journey Begins is the start of what I like to call Act 2A. I think Act 2 is split into two parts. There's a lot of chunky bits inside Act 2 in a lot of media, and so that's how I've split it up, and it generally pans itself out, and I'll go into those categories and subcategories as I go chapter by chapter to remind myself what happened in each chapter and align it with the categories that I've defined in the narrative patterns framework. Okay, so let's just get started. Chapter 6 opens up. We're still in the Allies Made section of Journey Begins, and what Allies Made, it's whatever's the moving piece in the story that's going to be relevant to the entire story. This is when you want to shift all your pieces on the board, and they got to get out there, they got to make allies, they got to make contacts, they got to learn of their adversaries, they got to get the pieces, and that's why I call it Allies Made. It doesn't always pan out that it's allies of the hero, but this is where the secondary stories are set up. This is when relationships are formed and built. And Chapter 6 goes straight into this narrative pattern I call the exploration pattern. It's the second part of Journey Begins, and this is where your hero or the main characters that are moving the story, they start exploring the world that they're in. This is really when the author or the director or the writer of some film or whatever the case might be, this is when they have the opportunity to describe stuff about the world. This is when they can give you the fluff, is what I call the fluff. It's going to happen in the next 20 pages or so. And so without skipping a beat, I mean, it starts off with Anderson at the Citadel, and because this takes place right after the whole Sidon experience and they got taken to the Citadel infirmary, this is Anderson getting taken care of, and the soldier he helps out of the place, which is Da is her name, and she reminds me of that of the blonde character, I forget her name, in Game of Thrones. She's like supposed to be like 6'4", 6'5", like she towers over Anderson, and Anderson's pretty tall. Anyways, so it's a cool relationship there, but it's very quick. They just kind of have this little bit of a humorous moment between them, and then it moves on. But what this chapter really lays down is this notion of exploration. If it's not just the characters exploring, it's the author exploring the world that they have to present to you as a reader. In this chapter alone, like I had to write down the notes here because it was happening throughout the entire chapter. So we have Anderson thinking about how communication works in this new era for humans, how the buoys work across the galaxy to like send these packets of information, and the information goes through Mass Effects, or it's like, so there's like a couple pages devoted to just how communication works, because I think like they really, in sci-fi like this where it's like cross galaxy, they have to establish like how do people communicate over light years, because it shouldn't be possible for all intents and purposes, right? So the author does have to paint that picture, and they basically say it's like by a fraction of the second. Like you can talk from one side of the galaxy to the other side of the galaxy, and it's a delay of a fraction of a second. That's how crazy this new technology is, using these buoys that go across the galaxy and jump through I guess Mass Effect, or like however the hell he described it. Anyways, it's in the codexes. But in any case, he jumps from there to talking about how time works, which is something I didn't get from the games, but they don't work on a 24-hour clock. They work on the, I forget what the kind of clock is called, but like the 0 to 24, they use that standard, but it's not even that. It's that, I think it's like a 26-hour day, but it's actually a 20-hour day, but then the hours are measured differently, the minutes are measured differently, the milliseconds are measured differently, and the net difference is really that it's like a 26-hour day. It's like how the math has to work, and they're working on like the Citadel time or whatever it's called. So then the book spends time talking about that, and this all leads to Anderson getting a call from his lawyer to confirm that the divorce is finally final. So it's like a downer. And this exploration pattern also contains in it this notion that this is when the protagonist, or this is like when some information is going to drop that destabilizes the protagonist, destabilizes something about one of the characters that's driving the story. It's supposed to be a downer that usually happens in the exploration pattern. And him confirming this divorce is a pretty big downer. And so this gets us into Chapter 7, where it's Anderson. He just heard this news, and so what do you do when you hear this kind of news? you head to the bar. So he heads to Cora's den, and of course we're still in the exploration pattern. So what do you expect to get in this chapter? Well, more character descriptions and world descriptions and more of that tapestry building, because he's essentially going to the cantina of Mass Effect. And what do you got there? Well, you got where a bunch of aliens are going to hang out. So this is the author's opportunity now to describe a couple of the other aliens in the universe, which he does. He describes the Batarian barkeeper. He describes the Turians that are looking at Anderson strangely as he walks in, because of course there's that weird animosity. It's not weird. I guess there's like that animosity between Turians and humans because of the war that happened, and it's still kind of fresh, but it's supposed to be neutral and everything's like whatever. But there's still dudes that kind of want to start crap because of that history. And so Anderson kind of like, he keeps his composure and he like steps by them, and he's not very easy to shake. Anderson he's just very he's very focused. Even like this, it's like it's not an important thing. He just wants to get his drink on because he got some bad news. But he has a mission. The mission is to drink and get drunk because he just got bad news. But the thing is, he can't drink too much because he's got to wake up in the morning to talk to basically do the Sidon debrief with the ambassador. She's supposed to be a hard ass, Anita Goyle. So he can't get too blasted. But in any case, this gets us through chapter 7, and that's pretty much it. It's him drinking at the bar and dropping some information about the world just to kind of really embed us in this experience. And then we get to chapter 8, and chapter 8 starts on page 110, and based on the pattern framework here, I've got the page count at 108. It's the third pattern of Journey Begins, a pattern I call settling in. And so with settling in, it's all about the hero getting more comfortable with their new role, perhaps superficially, but for now things seem good. And that's kind of like the byline I use for just to kind of trigger my thoughts here. And that's really what it is. He literally, at page 110, start of chapter 8, he wakes up in the morning. He didn't get too hungover because he, of course, took it easy, but he has to kind of forget about Cynthia right now because he's got to get through the Citadel. He's got to get to the Presidian, and he's got to talk to this ambassador who's going to like lay it on him. And if the patterns say anything, this is going to be when Anderson gets the information about Sidon and about Kaylee, because he has to learn something here in this pattern, the settling in pattern, because it's really about him getting the details to allow him to move the story on. He gets through this morning with the ambassador, of course, talk about Sidon, say that there's like something more going on there. We do learn about what was going on at Sidon, at the facility. It was the humans they were dabbling in AI, and they were trying to get advancements in that space, even though they weren't supposed to, and that's why it was like super cover ops for the Alliance to not be talking about this, and why it's kind of like this thing is on the edge of the veil, and it was like heavily secured, but something went south. And the information that gets dropped here is that maybe the people who wanted to take out Sidon, they were actually trying to take out the person running the facility, or specifically running the AI program by the name of Dr. Kean. And so Anderson asks, like, do you think Dr. Kean is still alive? And the ambassador says, my gut says he is. So if it was an inside job, was Kean behind it? And why was Kean behind it? Why would he have sabotaged this entire project? We don't know, but that's the seed that we got. And on top of that, it turns out that the ambassador actually drops Kaylee Sanders' name. She says that we have reports she was last seen on Ilium, and she's dropped off the grid since then. And then he asks, you figure if we find her, we find Dr. Kean? And she responds, we won't know that until you find her, Lieutenant. And that's literally that settling in. He's got his mission, and now it's time for him to take it and do something with it. He needs to get there before it attracts the attention of the Spectres. This is something that's mentioned in passing, but it's sort of important because of who's on the cover, and we haven't learned about where he is in the story yet, although he's coming. Who says if Spectre somehow finds out about this, they'll have to report it to the council. How far am I supposed to go to keep this secret? And then she says, are you asking if we're ordering you to kill an official agent of the council? The captain asks. Anderson nodded. I can't make that decision for you, Lieutenant. We trust your judgment. And that's it. And so you know that there's like the Alliance has to keep what was going on there secret. They have to keep that. That's like his mission. But she can't officially tell him what he can and cannot do. It's just take this information and now you got to do something with it. And chapter 9 opens up with Saren Arterius. So we finally get introduced to how Saren is going to play a part in this book. It was very well bridged because, of course, chapter 8 ends with the ambassador and Anderson talking about, like, we can't have the Spectres finding out about this. So, of course, that was the lead in the bridge into chapter 9. And that's page 124. That kicks off the next pattern, which I have marked here at page 121. It's the second part of Act 2A, which I call Challenge Accepted. And at this point, it's like some pieces are on the table for the protagonist or the subject that's moving the plot along at this particular moment, which is Anderson. There's a lot of players right now. And at this point, the protagonist doesn't have all the pieces. They're desperate for to still form those allies so that they can get more informed about the next steps they're supposed to take. In this case, because the narrative changes the point of view to Saren, this is for the reader at this point to understand, like, what are the other pieces. Like, we as readers don't even know what all the pieces are. We just have ideas of how the Doctor fits into this, how Kaylee fits into this, the AI project needing to be hidden from the council because it's illegal, and don't get the Spectres involved. So here we go. And the first part of 3 that make up this Challenge Accepted category is what I call the confrontation. And the confrontation is a very simple piece. It's just something is going to happen that just moves things forward, and there's very little planning involved. There's very little information that triggers that catalyst in the actual plot, in the flow of the story. But something is going to change in the story that moves it to this next place. And of course, having a chapter that opens up with Saren is right away going to be that, because you don't want them to get involved. The story is now telling you they are going to get involved. And so it's like, how does he get involved? And so the first half of chapter 9 is about, he's been tracking down this operation that's happening, and it's an illegal weapons deal, and it's happening between this small mercenary band called the Grim Skulls, and they're sort of novice for him. Like, he's just wondering, like, they're so green, almost like a waste of his time to get through this, because they're so easy to ping off. Like, he pings off the 2 guys guarding the door with a sniper rifle. He moves in casually. He throws 3 incendiary grenades into the room because he doesn't care whose side is, like, getting screwed here. But of course, then the people start firing because they don't know whose side is screwing who, and he just hides behind a vehicle, waits, pings off the guys who run out of the door with his assault rifle, does some roll across the vehicle, like his vehicle cover, comes out the other end, pings another guy. It's like systematically destroys this group. Goes in like this, like, gas grenade to, like, make sure that if there's anyone alive in there, well, they're gonna be poisoned next. This is where we get, like, the Saren motivation, because it's a Turian. You know, he's like, his anger is boiling up because he hates humans. Like, Saren hates humans. He hates how many Turians were killed by humans. He's not really forgetting it. He's not letting go of that. And so he kills the Turian for basically defecting on the race. Like, he's like, you shouldn't be a criminal. Like, this is beyond your station, sort of thing. And then he shoots him in the head. He doesn't even give him a chance. Like, there's no torture. There's no trying to get more information from this one. He's just gone. But then he finds another guy who he determines is not dead, and he makes this guy turn around, and he manages to get information out of this guy without doing anything. It's like, just his presence is intimidating, and this kind of, like, green merc, human, I think, just starts to spill the beans on, like, this was supposed to be a Blue Suns deal, but they pulled out last minute because they got this bigger job in flight right now, and they were afraid that this kind of little weapons deal was going to draw the attention of a Spectre, and so they pulled out of it because they needed that bigger deal to be safe from Spectre scrutiny or Spectre awareness. Of course, at the end of this merc is like, well, you're gonna let me go now, right? That's the deal. And Saren's like, what deal? You have nothing left to make a deal with. Pew pew pew, because he already spilled all the beans. So we're on page 132 at this point, and then it breaks there, and we go into the point of view of Anderson. Anderson's point of view shift happens on page 132. That's right on the precipice of the second pattern in the Challenge Accepted category. This sub-pattern is called Hero Triumphant. Hero Triumphant pattern is all about the hero getting a piece of information that helps them move forward just a little bit. It's like a small win just to get them to that next step. And what we get here is Anderson has been looking into Kaylee Sanders. Where he hits a bit of a blocker is he can't determine who her father is. There's, like, all the records of her father are are scrubbed. And he says, like, in this day and age, like, there's almost impossible because of just the technology and the way that information is stored and whatnot. And so he figures that's his lead. That's his lead at this point. The mother, we do find out Kaylee's mother has died, and so and after the death, she enlists inside to the Alliance, and she starts her training late, but she actually excels very quickly through the training and finishes the schooling like very quickly. She does a 3-year course in 2 years. I can't find the passage right now, but that information stuck out because it's, you know, in that little small bit of detail, it's telling you that she's very smart. She's basically genius level. She's into security, infrastructure and stuff like that. So we can kind of get the sense that that's how she got the information that she was going on, that maybe something corrupt is happening here, something's not right, and that's what caused her to bail out of the project. This naturally leads Anderson to going, well, I can't find the information's scrubbed. I gotta hit an information broker. And so he meets up with a Salarian who, I guess, with Alliance money, pays this Salarian info broker to dig up who the father is. And of course the Salarian does. I love the 2 pages devoted to this because the Salarian keeps on giving Anderson more information, which of course is exposition for us as a reader. But Anderson is like, just get to the point. And then it's like a little blurb about like Salarians, like it's hard for, like they speak very rapidly and they can't focus really well. I mean, it sort of reminds me of me actually. But anyways, and then he eventually, like 3 or 4 times later, he's like, just who is it? Just tell me the name. To which the Salarian responds, Rear Admiral John Grissom. He's on Elysium. So now that's the information Anderson needs to kick off the next piece, and that was what the whole pattern was about. Is someone needs to get this important information to move the story along, and it's to the pattern. So this moves us into chapter 10, page 139. We're still in Hero Triumphant, so which means from a reader's perspective, we're still gonna get maybe another drop of information. Something needs to happen, and because it's a chapter change, that normally tells us that the point of view is going to change, and that's exactly what happens. We switch back to a place called Sanctuary. It looks like it's a whorehouse essentially, and it's a Batarian going in there or trying to get in. Like, he's got like these clothes that's super expensive. You can tell this guy, this is not his element, but he got like a good payday. His name is Grotto Iba, and he wants to spend this money at a whorehouse. He wants to get the good life while he's got this money, and so he's pretending to be this elite dude, and this Krogan bouncer is trying to stop him from going in because he's basically pre-screening. But he pays the 400 credits to get in. Even if he doesn't get any service, that 400 credits is gone. But this Grotto is determined to get laid. He's determined to get laid, but not just a normal lay. He wants a human. And at that point, like, that's a red flag. Like, he wants a human. And then there's like very like overt language here about like he wants to be, like, you get the sense he's gonna mess up this person. Like, he wants to take out this rage, whether sexually or not. It doesn't seem sexually because he's not even attracted. He doesn't even care about that, but he's gonna release his rage out on a human. It's what you get the sense of. So, you know, from a reader's perspective, like when a writer does that kind of stuff, they use heavy language to just get those emotions tied to a character. What they're trying to say is, this guy's an asshole, don't worry about what's going to happen to him. That's generally the sign that this, and boy oh boy, let's just keep going on this chapter. Finally he picks one, he gets sent up to his room, and then he's waiting in there, and the door opens, and it's not a human consort. Oh no, it's Saren. Saren walks into the room. This guy immediately puts up his fist, like, to protect himself, because he's like, what the hell? Like obviously something is like fishy going on here, right? He gets messed up by Saren. Like, Saren wants answers. He breaks an elbow. He pokes out an eye. Grotto goes unconscious, comes back to when another set of bones is breaking. He's breaking fingers all over the place. Like, and with each thing is like he's just trying to get more and more information from this guy. And so Grotto was, I think he was part of that original deal where, you know, some of them went to Sidon to take it out. They bailed out. Some got left behind, got taken out by Anderson's men. The ones that did leave Sidon, at least that's my perception of it, were in that room with Eden. Eden being that business mogul, the guy who like set up this whole deal. They're trying to hire Scar, and then that altercation happens with Scar, and then 3 of them die. And so Grotto's perspective is like, well, he got to get paid. He didn't have to chance getting murdered by this biotic Krogan. He thought that he got away scot-free, he could live the life, but of course after this little encounter with Saren, he spills all the beans that he's aware of anyways at this point, because he starts to get to the point where he's got nothing else to lose. If anything, it just ends the torturing and he can just get killed, because he just wants the pain to end. He just wants the pain to end. And in any case, he gives him the name of Scar. So he says that the last information he got was that this deal was going down. They needed to find this person called Kaylee Sanders. She was like a loose end, and they hired a Krogan, Scar, to track down Kaylee Sanders. So now Saren has his information, and that's the end of the second pattern, where some information needed to be handed off to the characters moving the story along. We get Saren from the other side of the story finding out that the Blue Suns or whoever was hiring them has now brought in this reputable, and Saren like knows this biotic Krogan by name, and so he gets that information, which gives him a lead to then move us into the third part of the challenge accepted category, which is something I call false victory. So false victory is exactly what it sounds like. It's enough information gets out there that moves the character along because they feel like they've broken something, like they're going to get the win now. But of course, it's not going to be a win. It's going to be a false win, because generally what happens in this pattern is that as soon as the win happens, something happens to flip it on its head, flip it in 180. It's just something happens to make it go even worse. And that's what false victory is all about. And the main takeaway of what this next pattern is going to be about is that because things turn upside down, is whatever you thought you had a lead on, you're gonna have to you're gonna have to throw everything away. You're gonna throw everything away, because everything you thought is not exactly everything you thought. You're going to get more information that's going to require you to make a new plan, find a new motivation. It's like you're going to get more pieces that get you to pass into the next pattern. Chapter 11 starts with Anderson landing on Elysium. We know what Anderson is after. He's already got the information. He's going to track down John Grissom, and with that information, hopefully he'll get to Kaylee Sanders. So he does track down where Grissom is living. He goes to the house, knocks on the door. Grissom presumably doesn't recognize him. He tries to salute them. Grissom doesn't give a crap, and then he kind of just shrugs him off. If you're here from the Alliance because you want me to talk at something, I'm not going to do it. Just leave me alone. He's like, he's disheveled as hell. Like Anderson, he almost can't tell this is the same person as the person who interviewed him in the office like 8 to 9 years ago. And but really at the end of the day, it's Anderson is still probing, and he doesn't want to come out with the information while he's standing outside. So he's like, just let me in, I gotta talk about some stuff. He doesn't let him in. Then Anderson just drops the information. He's like, tell me about Kaylee Sanders. He just drops it right away. And who? So he plays dumb, because of course he's supposed to be the information is supposed to be scrubbed. No one's supposed to know who her father is. And Anderson repeats Kaylee Sanders, and he says, your daughter, the soldier who went UA from Sidon mere hours before it was attacked. The woman we're looking at as a traitor to the Alliance. He just drops it hard. That's what Anderson does. Like he measures the scene, and then he just gets to the point. He's very pragmatic. He needs to move the thing forward, and he does. This guy lets him in right away. This guy Grissom lets him in right away, and sits down. They talk about Kaylee, like that she was there, and Grissom is telling him she came to me asking for help because she was in trouble. Gives her the name of someone who can get her off planet, who runs this ship called the Gossamer, who's leaving, that does trade runs out near the Terminus system. And he shows some distress. Anderson says, don't worry, I'm on your side, I'm on her side. I don't think she's guilty, but I just need to protect her, because if I could find out who you were and find the connection to Kaylee Sanders, and she's obviously hiding something that someone else is going to find out. And of course Anderson is thinking, a Spectre might find out. We can't have the Spectres find out about this, because it's the Alliance's best interest that the Council doesn't find out about what the humans are doing at that lab. Anderson accepts the story that she got sent away. He thanks him for his time. He promises him that nothing is going to happen to Kaylee, that he will not let anything happen to her, and he leaves. He drives off, and Grissom is watching the car drive off, and then as soon as the car leaves the field of view, he goes to the back room, knocks on the door. Kaylee's, of course, in the building, and he says that, they're after you. I gave him exactly what they wanted, the chance to help an old, broken down hero remember something of who he used to be. So he plays the noble card, and the distress of being this old retired guy who used to be something important, but of course he doesn't give a crap about anything. Grissom actually is an old, disheveled, grumpy guy who doesn't want any part in anything, but he's like, you know, like he was never there for her as a father, how the marriage broke down for him as well, and Kaylee's mother, but that he's there to help her. And as far as he knows, he sent this officer Anderson on this wild goose chase across the galaxy that's going to probably throw him off the trail for a few days. And although the chapter hasn't ended, I'm going to end this video right here, because that's where the pattern ends, and where this actually breaks, it's actually going to change the point of view to someone who, of course, is on Kaylee's trail, which is no surprise to us because there's a third piece of this equation. We got Anderson is on the move, we got Saren on the move, but of course Scar is on the move. And so of course we can come to expect that that's where the tides are going to turn, and this whole false victory is going to happen when I come back for part 3 of this novel breakdown, review, narrative patterns discussion. And at this point, you know, at this page count point, like my speculation starts going off, because I know the next pattern is called higher stakes. I had some fun with the 3 parts, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the higher stakes pattern is made up of 3 parts: greater power, greater responsibility, and then greater confidence. So greater confidence, the confidence doesn't work in that Spider-Man quote, but I thought that was a fun way to kind of break down this pattern, because this is the moment where things they come to the boil. This is the beginning of Act 2B, because this is basically the peak of the story now. We're halfway through. This is the 50% mark. So this is the end of Act 2A. And we're now reaching the peak, and we're gonna go to the other side and start Act 2B. And so what that usually kicks off is, this is when all the everything is put on the table. Like, the reveals need to happen at this point. You need to know who the moving parts are. Like the higher stakes pattern, the byline I have here is, the antagonist is revealed to be a greater threat than anticipated, and the hero will need to re-strategize to confront it again. And so at this point we now have, you know, Saren is coming into the mix, but he's not really like an enemy yet. He's working for the council, and he has no rules like we know as players of the game at this point. But someone who's read this book before playing the game, I think this is more like he's a badass who just gets things done, and he's just brutal. He's brutal about the role he plays in the galaxy for the council. And then we have Scar, which we know is out there. That's going to be the actual threat. That's going to be the risk. Like, we've seen the power of Scar. Like, whereas Saren is brutal for a greater goal, like a goal that he believes in. And so where Scar is brutal because he's getting paid. He's getting a payday, and it's a big payday, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care what needs to go down. He's just, what's the mark, you know? And so because of the page count, and that's the 50% mark of the novel, it's not always exact. It just happens to be awesomely exact right now, and that makes me excited, because you know this is going to be, they're going to throw Scar at us. You know that's coming next. Spoiler alert, it does come next. Because I finished the chapter, and this is the end of the chapter. Scar comes next. Anyways, so we'll talk about that next episode, and I will see you there. Don't forget to explore, engage, and inspire, everybody. Peace. I tend to get super excited the longer I talk in these things. I noticed. Like, super excited. I'm lightheaded.